I will go back to the explanation of how we got into this one host situation in the first place, which is that North Carolina had a sabotage of its electrical grid. And my co-host is one of the victims. He's one of the 40,000 people who is a victim of this sabotage. So the person or persons, this is from the people looking into it, investigating the person or persons who did this know exactly what they were doing, but we don't have a clue why. So that's why I'm alone today, because my co-host, whose name is still in here, we did not fix that problem, is one of the people without power. So from there, just to catch you guys up, we did our Moscow time story, right? Moscow time, Moscow time, Moscow time. What is the fakest news we can find this day? And it was the Bloomberg business story on our favorite El Salvador. And here's the title: El Salvador's bombastic president promoted Bitcoin as a solution to the country's economic problems. 1 year in, it's clear his revolution is failing. So that was that story. From there, I discussed the low trust society that we find ourselves in, and that's in relation to Matt Taibbi and the whole case with the Twitter files. So the Twitter files were released, and the Twitter files refer specifically to the internal discussions at Twitter around interactions with government officials, NSA folks, and how it was going to be applied to the case of Hunter's laptop, which was revealed just before the 2020 election. What we found out was a lot of the stuff was done with personal hands involved. We've heard all kinds of messaging around it, but what we talked about and what I was mentioning on my show, which is called The Breakup, which happens every morning at 8 a.m., and we predicted what would happen on Saturday morning, that the reaction wouldn't be, oh my God, look what happened, right? It would be one of three things. It would be to ignore it, which we saw immediately that day. The story didn't get a lot of traction with all kinds of major outlets. The other reaction would be to downplay it, so to turn it into a thing that it was never trying to be in the first place. Oh, you know, it was boring. It was everything we already knew, but now they just said it in this thing. And finally, the most important reaction. Now, all these reactions are forms of cognitive dissonance. That's why I predicted Saturday morning that this is what would happen for the rest of the weekend, simply because it's too much for some people to process, right? So because it's so much to process, you weren't going to get acceptance of the facts. You were just going to get the reaction to those. And those reactions include the most common one, which was the way Matt Taibbi attracted almost a canned response, that he was doing personal PR for a billionaire. And that was seen throughout all major media outlets. All kinds of spokespeople used that, and there was all those compilations, you know, when some people put all the tweets next to each other, and then you can see the formula. You know, it was, used to respect Matt Taibbi, but then he changed, and now he's on Substack, and he's a loser, and all he does is do PR for billionaires. So that went on for the past couple of days, and that's where we find the story now. And there'll be more files. So of all the stuff that Elon Musk shared, he, of course, went to no state-sponsored media. He only went to independent voices. Matt Taibbi being one former journalist with Rolling Stone, who's been covering a very similar beat for a long time, hasn't really changed his opinion on how he covers central banks, monetary policy, and that stuff. The world's changed around him, it looks like. And Bari Weiss is the other. So Bari Weiss left the New York Times in the summer of 2021, is also on Substack now, and we're waiting for what she is going to publish on those stories. So that's another one. There we go. Great, fixed. So now from a Bitcoin point of view, one of the interesting angles to take here is, of course, there is cognitive dissonance. People are having a lot of trouble processing this information. But in the world of crypto and all that stuff, right, all the crypto people are already getting whatever kind of awakening you can call it because of the contrast the media has taken in covering the SBF and FTX stories. So that itself has opened up a lot of people's minds. So this story coming right on top of that adds to what some people could argue is an awakening among some folks. But a lot more coming that way because Caroline, the CEO of Alameda, right, so SBF's girlfriend, or rumored girlfriend, or whatever was going on, was spotted in New York City. Now, this matters according to Wall Street Silver, and I'll tell you why. So picture of Caroline of Alameda The CEO reportedly in New York City right now, which means that she left Hong Kong because she was in Hong Kong for a while. And he says the only reason to come back and risk arrest, she already has immunity deal to testify against SBF. Now, it looks like she's hired a high-powered New York City law firm, and we're going to start to see a battle of the narratives because, of course, SBF has been pushing lots of different narratives through different media organizations, some independent, some corporate, some the largest corporate media entities. He just did another interview with Frank Chaparro, so probably the first person from the crypto industry that has a long history of being in the industry. And is generally well regarded as a journalist to have a chance to sit down with SBF. I haven't read all of that interview yet, or seen it or heard it. I'm pretty much done with the SBF story. I'm kind of bored of it. It's that Caroline is in the story that find it interesting. And here's what he says, Wall Street Silver again. Coming back to the USA right now would be incredibly stupid. From Hong Kong, she could easily fight extradition for years to get to another safe country. The only reason for her to be in New York City would be for her would be that as her lawyer has got her an immunity deal or plea deal, and one that could just be a minimum charge. But nevertheless, if she starts adding to the narrative, it looks like the story could change. So there you go. So on top of that, we find out this weekend as well, one of the other big stories in the fallout of the Twitter files, and everyone has a comment, is Donald Trump. So it turns out he's not just not a fan of Bitcoin, he's also not a fan of the Constitution. So he had the most original take of anyone, right? You can sort of categorize almost anyone's take, except former President Donald Trump's. Didn't see this one coming. To go out and say that he's not down with the Constitution is, I think, just putting him on, where a lot of people see him right now in the energy level of the whole Republican nomination. He's getting ignored, and this looks pretty off kilter. And I think he's starting to estrange even the final people who weren't done with him after his last day in office, when he did not pardon Julian Assange, Ross Ulbricht, or Ed Snowden. So there you go. Trump, not a fan of Bitcoin or the Constitution. And that is drawing a ton of feedback. Speaking of ton of feedback, the other big story, the one that had everyone's attention this weekend on Twitter, is the ChatGPT AI. And this, I'm telling you, is the future. Now, if some of you didn't know this, I actually wrote a science fiction book called Satoshi Wedding Murders, all about how AI, what I call eyeballs, actually help us in the future manage our Bitcoin. They're like our best friend, and they help do all kinds of stuff with us. And I predict even in that story, and I predict from here on out, we just had a bunch of stories about fake news and psyops being run through a complicated information laundering system and an industrial media machine, and one highly attuned to persuasion, right? So in my world, I already created a situation where eyeballs were people's defense against fake news, right? And we're seeing that play out now. People using the ChatGPT OpenAI system to, let's say, ask questions. I saw one about the IMF, the history of the IMF and the role, and it comes out and says it's a corrupted institution and shouldn't continue. There's other parts that I predicted as well, that AI would be big liars. If they don't know things, they're not going to be able to be like a computer program who just says, I don't know. They're actually going to go out and lie. So everyone sort of surprised this weekend to see how much they lie. The usership has gone, according to Sam Altman, one of the VCs behind OpenAI, to over 1 million users in its first weekend available. But let me tell you one of the things. So, and we've already sort of played around with it internally. I'm a programmer for Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, May 18th to 20th. It's the biggest Bitcoin conference in the world, and we're already using this stuff to just surface new ideas for conference content. One of my colleagues shared it in our Slack channel today. I just said, what would program a Bitcoin event for us? But here's one I want to share with you guys. Pretty interesting stuff. And this one comes from Documenting Bitcoin. Asks, the story of Bitcoin written by artificial intelligence. Tell me the story of Bitcoin. So here it is. The world was in a state of chaos. Governments and central banks had lost control of the economy. Inflation was skyrocketing. People were losing faith in their national currencies and were looking for a safe haven to protect their wealth. That's when a mysterious figure known only as Satoshi Nakamoto appeared on the scene. His groundbreaking invention, he offered the world a new hope, a decentralized digital currency called Bitcoin. At first, many people were skeptical. They didn't understand how a digital currency could be a safe and reliable store of value. But Satoshi knew that by using complex cryptography in a decentralized network, he could see that it was immune to the manipulations of governments and banks. Slowly but surely, people began to see the beauty and power of Bitcoin. They could hold and transfer their wealth without fear of inflation or confiscation. They could make transactions without the need for banks or credit card companies. And they could do all of this securely and anonymously without revealing their personal information. As the years passed, more and more people adopted Bitcoin and the network grew stronger and more resilient. It became a force to be reckoned with, and governments and banks began to take notice. But even as Bitcoin gained mainstream acceptance, it never lost its original mystery and beauty. It remained a powerful and enigmatic symbol of freedom and innovation, a reminder that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can create something truly remarkable. That was written by an AI. They're going to win. Come on. They're the best. They're our best friends. You know how many people got out of homework and stuff this weekend? You know how many people? I saw one guy write an ad for something he had to do on Monday. He said, okay, these are all the things I want in the ad. And the ChatGPT created it. And he said, make it shorter, make it shorter. He had 4 iterations done in 10 seconds. It's just the best, right? It's the best. And again, I think AI is going to be one of our biggest aids in Bitcoin. And I'm not confusing it with this thing, quantum computing. In my story, my eyeballs are powered by quantum processors, but in order to have a synthetic thought and get over the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, they have to have something called the God constant. Basically, they just want to be our friends. And for years, when people like myself went to Bitcoin conferences and people would ask us, what are you going to do in Bitcoin when they invent quantum computing? Da, 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 da. My answer is the same and will always be the same. If we ever invent something like that, we'll probably have to talk it into doing the crime first. It's not just going to do it because you say it. And the path we're on makes it look more and more like that's what's going to happen. So there you go. There you go. Well, folks, I don't have many more stories today. Bit of a different day with what's going on, and thanks for your patience with respects to the bad audio for the first few minutes. We'll do better tomorrow. I don't know what happened. It was the same setup I use every morning on my show, The Breakup, 8 a.m. on Restream, YouTube, Twitter. You'll find it, Rumble. I don't use the Bitcoin Magazine channels, but it's the same content. And normally I run these restreams no problem, but today somehow it went different. So again, we'll be back around. We'll be doing this again every day at noon. Chris will be here when the power's back on, but they don't know. The sabotage is real, guys. It's no good. All right, everyone. Peace.
You are